An exhausted waitress saves an injured stranger in a rain-soaked alley, never imagining he's the city's most dangerous mafia boss. When he insists on repaying the debt, his protection becomes a cage, and she must choose between safety and freedom. The coffee machine hissed one last time before Lena pulled the plug. 2:47 a.m. Another 16-hour shift done. Her feet screamed with every step across the checkered floor of Harbor Diner, but at least the rain had finally chased away the last drunk customer. She could close early. For once. Just take out the trash and go home, she whispered to herself, grabbing 2 bulging garbage bags. Then sleep. Beautiful, beautiful sleep. The back alley was a curtain of rain. Cold October wind slapped her face the moment she pushed open the steel door. Lena hurried toward the dumpster, her worn sneakers splashing through puddles that reflected the single flickering streetlight. She tossed the first bag in. Then she saw the hand. Pale. Motionless. Reaching out from behind the dumpster like it was trying to grab onto life itself. The second bag slipped from Lena's fingers. Oh God. She stumbled backward, heart hammering, then forced herself forward. Someone's hurt. Move. Move. The man was crumpled against the brick wall, half hidden in shadow. Mid-40s, maybe. Expensive suit, now soaked and torn. His white shirt wasn't white anymore. It was crimson, darkest around his side where his hand pressed weakly against the wound. Blood. So much blood. Sir? Sir, can you hear me? Lena dropped to her knees, rain instantly soaking through her jeans. She pressed 2 fingers against his neck. Pulse. Faint but there. His eyes fluttered open, sharp gray eyes that locked onto hers with startling intensity, even in his weakened state. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Then his eyes rolled back. No, 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 stay with me. Lena's hands shook as she fumbled for her phone. She dialed 911. 911. What's your emergency? There's a man. He's been stabbed, I think. He's bleeding badly behind Harbor Diner on Westfield. Ma'am, I'm sorry, but emergency services are delayed. The storm has caused flooding on Route 9, and… Delayed? He's dying. We'll get someone there as soon as possible, but it could be 40 minutes or… Lena hung up. 40 minutes. He'd be dead in 10. Her mind raced. The first aid course she'd taken 3 years ago when her mother got sick. Could she remember? She had to remember. Stop the bleeding. Apply pressure. Keep him warm. She yanked off her jacket and pressed it hard against the wound. The man's eyes shot open with a gasp of pain, and for a second, she saw something in those gray eyes, not fear, but recognition. Like he understood exactly what was happening to him. Like he'd expected it. I've got you, Lena said, though her voice trembled. You're going to be okay. He tried to speak again. This time, a single word escaped. Run. I'm not leaving you. His hand suddenly gripped her wrist, stronger than she expected. His eyes bored into hers with desperate urgency. Dangerous. Run. Save your strength. Lena pressed harder against the wound. The bleeding was slowing, but not enough. She needed supplies. Bandages. Anything. She looked back at the diner door. Her first aid kit was inside, under the counter. But if she left him, even for a minute, no choice. I'll be right back. Don't you dare die on me. Lena sprinted back inside, shoes squeaking on wet linoleum. She grabbed the first aid kit, a stack of clean towels, and the emergency blanket from the storage closet. 30 seconds. That's all it took. But it felt like hours. When she burst back outside, she half expected to find him dead. Instead, he was watching the alley entrance, his hand inside his jacket, tense. When he saw it was her, his hand relaxed. Was he reaching for a weapon? Lena shoved the thought aside. She wasn't saving a criminal. She was saving a person. She worked quickly, packing the wound with gauze, wrapping it tight with bandages, layering towels over everything. The rain made it nearly impossible, washing away her work as fast as she could do it. So she dragged him, inch by agonizing inch, under the metal awning by the back door. He groaned with each movement, but he was conscious now, watching her. "What's your name?" she asked, trying to keep him alert. He didn't answer. "Okay, mysterious stranger. I'm Lena, and you're going to live, because I don't let people die in my alley. House rule." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. She wrapped the emergency blanket around him, then sat beside him, keeping pressure on the wound. Her jacket was ruined. Her uniform was soaked. She was shivering so hard her teeth chattered. But the bleeding had finally stopped. "Just hang on," she whispered. "Morning's coming." He turned his head to look at her. Really look at her. Those gray eyes held something she couldn't quite read. Surprise, maybe. Or disbelief. "Why?" His voice was barely audible over the rain. "Why are you helping me?" Lena blinked. "Because you need help. Why else?" He stared at her for a long moment, like she'd just said something in a foreign language. Then his eyes closed, and his breathing deepened. Lena kept her hand on his pulse, checking every few minutes. Alive. Still alive. The rain finally softened to a drizzle as the sky began to lighten. Lena's exhaustion crashed over her in waves, but she didn't dare sleep. She counted his breaths, checked the bandages, waited. When the first golden rays of sunrise broke through the clouds, she finally heard sirens in the distance. "Hear that?" she said softly. "Help's coming. You made it." But when she looked down at the man's face, his eyes were open and filled with something that made her blood run cold. Not gratitude. Recognition. Like he was memorizing every detail of her face. "Thank you," he whispered. "You'll understand soon." Then his hand slipped from hers, and his eyes closed again. The ambulance arrived at 6:14 a.m. Lena stood up on shaky legs, relief flooding through her. "He's over here. He's lost a lot of blood, but I stopped the bleeding and—" She turned toward the spot where she'd left him. Empty. The emergency blanket lay crumpled on the wet pavement. The blood-soaked towels were still there. But the man was gone. "Miss?" The paramedic looked at her with concern. "Where's the patient?" Lena's mouth opened and closed. "He was right here. I swear, he was right here 5 minutes ago." She'd only stepped away to wave down the ambulance. 5 minutes. Maybe less. The second paramedic crouched down, examining the scene. "There's definitely blood here. Fresh. But no trail leading away." He looked up at his partner. "Could he have walked?" "Not with a wound like this." The first paramedic pointed at the soaked towels. "He'd have collapsed within 20 feet. But there was no body. No trail. No sign of struggle. It was as if he'd simply vanished." "Miss, are you sure there was someone here?" The paramedic's tone had shifted, gentler now, like he was talking to someone confused. "Sometimes after a long shift, exhaustion can—" "I didn't imagine him." Lena's voice came out sharper than she intended. "Look at the blood. Look at the bandages. I spent 4 hours keeping him alive." The paramedics exchanged glances. The kind of glances that said they'd write this up as a possible mental health call. "We'll file a report," one of them said carefully. "If someone shows up at a hospital with a stab wound, we'll know. But Mississippi, if you're feeling overwhelmed, there are resources." "I'm fine." Lena's jaw tightened. "Thank you for coming." She watched them leave, their red lights disappearing into the morning mist. Then she stood alone in the alley, staring at the empty space where a dying man had been. How? She knelt down where he'd lain, searching for what? Evidence she wasn't crazy. Her hand brushed against something cold and metallic wedged between the pavement cracks. A ring. Heavy. Black metal. Maybe titanium. No gemstone, but there was an engraving on the inside, a symbol she didn't recognize. Something that looked like a crowned serpent wrapped around a sword. Lena turned it over in her palm. Expensive. The kind of thing that could pay her rent for 3 months. She should turn it in.
Give it to the police.
But something stopped her. Maybe it was the way he'd looked at her, that mixture of warning and gratitude. Maybe it was the word he'd whispered, dangerous. Or maybe she just wanted proof that she hadn't hallucinated the entire night. Lena slipped the ring into her pocket and went inside to clean up. The diner opened at 7 a.m., same as always. Lena moved through her shift on autopilot, pouring coffee, taking orders, forcing smiles. Her mind kept replaying the night. His gray eyes.
The blood.
That final whisper. You'll understand soon. By noon, the lunch crowd filled every booth. That's when Lena first heard the whispers. Haven't seen any of Moretti's guys in 2 days. She was refilling coffee at booth 7. The two men, regulars, construction workers who always ordered the meatloaf special, kept their voices low. You think it's true? That someone finally got to him? All I know is the docks have been quiet. No shipments. No collections. Something big went down. Lena's hand froze mid-pour. Moretti? Both men looked up, suddenly nervous. Just rumors, Lena. Nothing to worry about. Who's Moretti? She pressed. The older one, Frank, shifted uncomfortably. Vincent Moretti. Runs things around the harbor. Has for 15 years. He lowered his voice even more. Word is someone tried to take him out Tuesday night. Nobody's seen him since. Tuesday night. The night she found the man in the alley. Lena's heart started to pound. Take him out? You mean? I mean exactly that. Frank glanced around nervously. But you didn't hear it from me. People who talk about Moretti tend to. Well, let's just say it's not healthy. The younger guy nudged him. Shut up, Frank. Don't scare her. But Lena was already walking away, the coffee pot trembling in her hand.
No.
It couldn't be. The man she'd saved, the one with the expensive suit and the gray eyes that held too much knowledge, couldn't be Vincent Moretti. The Vincent Moretti. The man whose name made people whisper and look over their shoulders. But the pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. The stab wound, professional, precise. The way he'd reached for a weapon when she came back outside. The fact that he'd disappeared without a trace, despite being at death's door. Because men like that don't go to hospitals. They have doctors who come to them. Lena's hand found the ring in her apron pocket. She pulled it out, studying the crowned serpent symbol in the fluorescent light. Hey Lena, you okay? Her co-worker, Danny, touched her shoulder. You look like you've seen a ghost. She shoved the ring back in her pocket.
I've fine.
Just tired. But she wasn't fine. She'd saved the life of the most dangerous man in the city. And he knew her face. Knew where she worked. You'll understand soon. Lena looked out the diner window at the gray morning, and for the first time, she felt like she was being watched. Not by anyone she could see, but by invisible eyes. Eyes that never blinked. The lunch rush continued around her. People laughed and ate and complained about the weather. None of them knew that 2 nights ago, the balance of power in their city had shifted. And it had shifted because a tired waitress couldn't leave a dying man in an alley. 3 days passed like a held breath. Lena kept her head down, worked her shifts, and told herself everything would go back to normal. The ring stayed hidden in her apartment, wrapped in an old sock at the back of her drawer. She didn't look at it, didn't think about it. Except she thought about it constantly. Every time the diner door opened, her heart jumped. Every black car that passed made her freeze. She'd saved a Mafia boss's life, and in the movies, that meant one of 2 things, a reward or a silencing. She wasn't sure which terrified her more. Friday afternoon, the rain returned. Lena was wiping down table 6 when Danny whistled low from the window.
Whoa.
Check out that ride. A black Mercedes had pulled up directly in front of the diner, sleek, expensive, and completely out of place on their rundown street. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like sheets of obsidian. Lena's stomach dropped. The rear door opened, and 2 men stepped out. Both wore tailored suits that probably cost more than Lena made in 6 months. Both moved with the kind of casual confidence that came from never having to look over their shoulders. Because they were the ones people looked out for. "They're coming in here," Danny said, suddenly nervous. "Lena, those are—" I know, her voice sounded distant to her own ears. The bell above the door chimed. Every conversation in the diner died. Forks stopped midair. Coffee cups paused at lips. Everyone recognized what these men represented, even if they didn't know their names. The taller one, dark hair, a scar through his left eyebrow, scanned the room until his eyes landed on Lena. He walked straight toward her. Lena's survival instinct screamed run, but her legs wouldn't move. "Lena Castellano?" His voice was surprisingly polite, almost gentle. She managed a nod. He reached into his jacket, half the diner flinched, and pulled out a cream-colored envelope. From a grateful friend. The second man, shorter but broader, positioned himself by the door. Not blocking it.
Just
observing. Making sure nobody interfered. Lena stared at the envelope like it might bite her. "I don't." He insists. The tall one placed it on the table in front of her. "The car will wait 15 minutes. We hope you'll accept. And if I don't..." Something flickered across his face. "Respect, maybe. Then we leave, and you never hear from us again. You have his word." He touched 2 fingers to his forehead in an odd salute, then both men walked out. The Mercedes's engine purred softly outside, waiting. Danny rushed over the moment they left. "Holy crap, Lena. What was that?" "I don't know." Her hands shook as she picked up the envelope. Heavy paper. Expensive. "Are you gonna open it?" She should throw it away. Pretend this never happened. Go back to her simple, safe, predictable life. But her fingers were already sliding under the seal. Inside was a single card, handwritten in elegant script. "You saved a life without asking questions or demanding payment. Such kindness is rare in my world. I would like to thank you properly and return something that belongs to you. The choice is yours, but I hope you'll allow me the honor of your company. 1 hour. Just a conversation. Nothing more. V.M." At the bottom was an address in the wealthy part of town, Hillcrest Medical Plaza. A private clinic.
well,
Danny leaned over her shoulder. "What's it say?" Lena folded the card carefully. "I have to go." "Are you insane?" "Lena, those were." "I know what they were." She untied her apron with trembling fingers. "But if I don't go, I'll spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. At least this way, I'll know." "Know what?" "What he wants from me." The Mercedes smelled like leather and power. Lena sat in the back seat, hands folded in her lap, while the 2 men rode up front in complete silence. Classical music played softly through hidden speakers, something elegant she didn't recognize. The drive took 20 minutes through increasingly upscale neighborhoods. The buildings grew taller, cleaner, more modern. This was a part of the city Lena rarely visited. Couldn't afford to visit. Hillcrest Medical Plaza was all glass and steel, surrounded by perfectly manicured gardens. The Mercedes pulled into a private entrance at the rear. "3rd floor," the tall one said, finally speaking. "Suite 304. He's expecting you." Lena stepped out onto pavement, so clean it practically sparkled. "You're not coming?" "He wants to speak with you alone." A pause. "You're safe here, Miss Castellano. Safer than anywhere else in the city right now." The way he said it made it sound like both a promise and a warning. Inside, the lobby was all marble and soft lighting. A receptionist smiled warmly and directed her to the private elevators without asking questions. Like she was expected. Like this happened all the time. Maybe it did. The elevator rose silently. Lena watched the numbers climb. 1, 2, 3, and wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. The doors opened. Suite 304 was at the end of a quiet hallway. The door was already ajar. Lena pushed it open. The room beyond was more like a luxury apartment than a medical suite. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Soft leather chairs. Fresh flowers on a mahogany desk. And standing by the window, back turned, was a man in a dark suit. He turned around. Those gray eyes locked onto hers, sharp, intelligent, fully alert now. No longer clouded by pain and blood loss. Vincent Moretti looked exactly like what he was, a man who commanded empires with a glance. Miss Castellano, his voice was smooth, cultured. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. Lena lifted her chin, refusing to be intimidated. You have something that belongs to me? A smile ghosted across his lips.
Direct.
I like that. He walked to the desk and picked up a small object. Her sock. The one she'd wrapped his ring in. I believe, Vincent Moretti said softly, we need to talk about what happens next. Lena's blood ran cold. How did you get that? Vincent set the sock and the ring still inside it, on the desk between them. I needed to know who saved my life. That required information. He said it so casually, like breaking into someone's apartment was a normal Tuesday activity. You broke into my home. I had someone check on your safety, he corrected her gently, as if the distinction mattered. The ring was merely confirmation. You could have sold it, pawned it, turned it over to the police. But you hid it.
Why?
Lena's hands clenched into fists. She should be terrified. She was terrified, but anger was easier to hold onto than fear. Because I'm not stupid. I figured out who you were. And I knew that ring would connect me to you. Smart. Vincent moved to one of the leather chairs and gestured for her to sit. Please. I'll stand. Another smile, this one with genuine amusement. Also smart. Never accept comfort from someone you don't trust. He sat anyway, relaxed and confident. Let me be direct, Miss Castellano. You saved my life. In my world, that creates a debt. A significant 1 inch. I don't want anything from you. I know. That's what makes this complicated. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded check. He placed it on the desk, facing her. But I insist. Lena's eyes dropped to the check despite herself. The number had so many zeros she had to count them twice. $250,000. Her brain couldn't process it. That was 4 years of her salary. That was her mother's medical bills paid in full. That was a new start, a new life, everything she'd ever desperately needed. Take it, Vincent said quietly. Pay off your debts. Help your mother. Get out of that apartment with a broken heater and the lock that doesn't work. How do you know about? Lena cut herself off. Of course he knew. He'd had people watching her, learning everything about her. The thought made her skin crawl. Because it's my business to know, he leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You work 16-hour shifts at a diner that barely pays minimum wage. You send half your paycheck to cover your mother's medications. You eat ramen 4 nights a week, so she doesn't have to go without physical therapy. And despite all of that, when you found a dying stranger in an alley, you didn't call the police and walk away. You stayed. You saved me. Lena's throat tightened. Hearing her life summarized so clinically, so completely felt like being stripped naked in front of a stranger. The money is yours, Vincent continued. No strings. No obligations. Just gratitude. No, the word came out stronger than she felt. Vincent's eyebrows rose slightly. No. I didn't save you for money. I saved you because you were dying, and I'm not the kind of person who walks away from that. Lena met his eyes directly. If I take your money, then that night becomes a transaction. It becomes something I did instead of something I am. So no. Keep your check, Mr. Moretti. Silence filled the room. Vincent stared at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Then, slowly, he started to laugh, a genuine sound, rich with surprise and something that might have been respect. Remarkable, he said finally. Do you know how many people would kill for that check? Literally kill? I'm not most people. No, his expression shifted, becoming more serious. You're really not. He picked up the check and, to Lena's shock, tore it in half. Very well. But Miss Castellano, a debt remains. And in my world, unpaid debts create complications. I don't want complications from your world. Too late, Vincent stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. The moment you saved my life, you stepped into it. My enemies will eventually learn what you did. They'll see you as leverage, a weakness to exploit. Lena's stomach churned. Then we tell them the truth. That you don't owe me anything. That we're strangers. And you think they'll believe that? He glanced back at her. These are men who trust nothing and see conspiracy in everything. No, Miss Castellano. Like it or not, you need protection now. I don't need. Marco, Vincent called out. The door opened immediately. The tall man with the scarred eyebrow entered. From this moment forward, Vincent said, his tone shifting from conversational to commanding, nothing bad touches her. Not a broken taillight. Not a late rent payment. Not a shadow falling wrong across her path. Understood. Marco nodded once, sharply. Understood, boss. Wait, Lena started. But Vincent was already walking toward a side door. He paused at the threshold. I know you think you don't want my help, Miss Castellano. But you saved my life without asking permission. Now I'm going to protect yours the same way. This is insane. This is gratitude. He opened the door. Marco will drive you home. Your ring is on the desk. Keep it or throw it away, your choice. But know this. You're under my protection now. Whether you like it or not. And if I refuse? Vincent's smile was sad. Then you'd be the first person in 15 years to turn down Vincent Moretti's friendship. And I'd respect you even more than I already do, he paused. But the protection stands. Call it a weakness of mine. I don't let good people get hurt because of me. Then he was gone, disappearing through the door like smoke. Lena stood alone in the luxurious suite, her mind reeling. Marco waited patiently by the main entrance. Miss Castellano, he said gently. Whenever you're ready.
She looked at the desk.
At the torn check. At the ring in her sock. At the life she'd just accidentally traded for something she didn't understand. This is insane, she whispered again. But she picked up the ring anyway. The first sign came 3 days later. Lena stood in her apartment hallway, staring at the eviction notice that should have been taped to her door. Should have been, but wasn't. Instead, there was a yellow sticky note in handwriting she didn't recognize. Rent paid through December. Management. Her hands trembled as she unlocked her door. She immediately called the building manager, Mrs. Chen. Oh yes, Lena. Mrs. Chen sounded cheerful. Someone paid 6 months in advance.
Cash.
Very generous boyfriend you have. I don't have a. Lena stopped. Who paid it? A courier service. Very professional. The money's legitimate. Already deposited. You're all set. Lena hung up slowly. 6 months' rent. $3,000. Paid by a courier service. She looked at Vincent Moretti's ring, which now sat on her nightstand. She'd meant to throw it away 12 times. But something always stopped her. Nothing bad touches her. No, she whispered to the empty apartment. This isn't happening. But it was. 2 days after that, her mother called. Lena, sweetheart, the strangest thing happened. Margaret Castellano's voice wavered with emotion. St. Michael's Hospital called. They said a donor, anonymous, wants to cover my physical therapy. All of it. For the next year. Lena nearly dropped her phone. What? They said it's part of some new charitable program. I didn't even apply for it, but they have all my information. They're scheduling me for 3 sessions a week starting Monday. Her mother's voice cracked. Lena, this is a miracle. I'll actually get better. I might be able to walk without the cane again. Lena should have been happy. She was happy for her mother. But underneath the relief was something cold and creeping. Mom, did they say who the donor was? Anonymous.
They were very firm about that. Why?
Does it matter?
It mattered.
It mattered so much Lena couldn't breathe.
No, Mom.
It's wonderful. I'm so happy for you. After they hung up, Lena sat on her bed and stared at the wall. Her mother's treatment cost $1,800 a month. Money Lena had been drowning trying to provide. Now it was just handled by an invisible hand that knew exactly where to reach. The car appeared on Thursday morning. Lena walked out of her building at 5 a.m. for her early shift and froze. Where her 15-year-old Honda usually sat, the one with the broken passenger window and the engine that sounded like a dying cat, was a modest silver Toyota.
New.
Maybe 2 years old at most. A note sat under the windshield wiper. Your old vehicle was a safety hazard. This one is registered in your name. Title in the glove box. A friend. No, Lena looked around the empty street, half expecting to see Marco or one of Vincent's men watching from the shadows. No, no, no. She tried the door. Unlocked. The interior smelled like new car and leather. The keys sat in the cup holder. The title in the glove box was indeed in her name, fully paid, no loans. $20,000. Minimum. Lena slammed the door and walked the 2 miles to work instead. But when her shift ended 12 hours later, the Toyota was parked in the diner's lot.
Her old Honda was gone.
Like it had never existed. You look terrible, Danny said that afternoon, sliding a cup of coffee across the counter to her. Thanks, Lena didn't touch it. Seriously, what's going on? You've been jumpy all week. How could she explain that a mob boss was secretly running her life, like some kind of twisted fairy godfather? That every problem she'd struggled with for years was being systematically erased by money and power she never asked for. Just tired, she lied. Danny didn't look convinced. Is it those guys who came by last week? Because if someone's bothering you, nobody's bothering me. That's the problem. Danny frowned. That doesn't make sense. It didn't. But nothing made sense anymore. By the end of the second week, Lena had compiled a mental list. A rent, paid through December, mom's medical treatment, 1 year, fully covered car, replaced the parking tickets she'd been ignoring, dismissed her student loan payment, mysteriously delayed, then forgiven due to processing error, the leaking pipe in her bathroom, fixed while she was at work, no charge, her usual coffee order at the diner. Someone had left $100 tip for her last Tuesday. That last one broke something in her. Lena sat in the empty diner after closing, the $100 bill on the counter in front of her. It wasn't about the money. It was about the watching. Someone, Vincent's people, were tracking her every move. Her problems. Her needs. Her life. She should have been grateful. Part of her was. Her mother was getting treatment. She wasn't drowning in debt. She had a car that actually started. But the other part, the bigger part, felt like a bird in a golden cage. Because that's what this was, wasn't it?
A cage.
Made of kindness instead of bars, but a cage nonetheless. Vincent Moretti had promised protection. He had mentioned it would feel like surveillance. Lena pulled out her phone and typed the address of the medical plaza into her maps. She'd gone once. She could go again. This time, she wasn't accepting an invitation. This time, she was demanding answers. The next morning, Lena walked into Harbor Diner for her shift and immediately noticed the change in atmosphere. The regular customers, Frank and the other construction workers, Mrs. Rodriguez, who always ordered scrambled eggs, even the teenagers who came in after school, they were all there. But none of them were looking at her. When she approached Frank's booth with a coffee pot, he suddenly found his menu fascinating. Morning, Frank. The usual? Yeah, he didn't meet her eyes. Thanks, Lena. She filled his cup, frowning. Everything okay? Frank glanced at his coworker, then back at his menu.
Fine.
Everything's fine, but it wasn't. And as Lena moved through the diner, she felt it everywhere. The whispers that stopped when she approached, the careful way people avoided her gaze, the sudden silence when she entered a room. Danny pulled her aside during the lunch rush. His face was pale. Lena, people are talking. About what? He lowered his voice to barely a whisper.
About you.
About him. Her stomach dropped. What are they saying? That you're Vincent Moretti's woman now. That you're together. The coffee pot nearly slipped from Lena's hands. That's insane. I barely know him. I know that. You know that. Danny glanced around nervously. But that's not what people see. They see the car. They see that you're suddenly not worried about money anymore. And they know those men came here looking for you. He paused. Lena, be careful. In this neighborhood, being connected to Moretti, even if it's not true, that makes you untouchable. And people don't like untouchable. Lena looked around the diner, at the customers who'd known her for 3 years, who'd left her Christmas tips and asked about her mother's health and treated her like family. Now they looked at her like she was dangerous. Like she was his. The breaking point came on a Wednesday evening. Lena was leaving the diner after a brutal double shift when she noticed Mrs. Rodriguez, sweet, 70-year-old Mrs. Rodriguez, who always asked about her mother and left exact change plus a $1 tip, crossing the street to avoid walking past her. Their eyes met for just a second. Mrs. Rodriguez looked away quickly, clutching her purse tighter. Like Lena was going to rob her. Like Lena was dangerous. Something snapped. Lena pulled out her phone and called the only number Vincent had left her, written on the back of that card from their first meeting. She'd saved it, even though she'd told herself she never would. A man answered on the first ring. Miss Castellano. Not a question. They knew it was her. I need to see him.
Now.
Mr. Moretti is. Now, her voice cracked. Or, I swear I'll walk into the nearest police station and tell them everything. A pause. A car will be there in 10 minutes. It took 8. This time, they didn't take her to the medical plaza. The Mercedes wound through streets she didn't recognize, heading toward the harbor. They stopped in front of an old warehouse that had been converted into something else, expensive, judging by the security and the sleek entrance hidden from the street. Marco opened her door. 2nd floor. He's expecting you. The interior was all exposed brick and modern fixtures. Clearly a front for something, though Lena couldn't tell what. The 2nd floor opened into a spacious office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the dark water. Vincent stood at those windows, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He didn't turn when she entered. I wondered when you'd come, he said quietly. You've ruined my life. Lena's voice shook with anger she'd been holding back for weeks. Do you understand that? You've completely ruined it. Now he turned. His expression was unreadable. I've paid your rent, helped your mother, given you safety. You've made me a pariah. The word exploded out of her. Nobody will talk to me anymore. My customers avoid me. My coworkers are terrified. Mrs. Rodriguez, who has known me for 3 years, crossed the street to get away from me today. Vincent's jaw tightened slightly. I see.
Do you?
Do you really? Lena stepped closer, her fear drowned out by fury. They think I'm your woman. They think I'm sleeping with you, that I'm part of your world. And, because of that, I'm alone. I'm more alone now than I've ever been. People will always talk. Don't, she cut him off. Don't you dare minimize this. You promised protection, but all you've done is paint a target on my back and isolate me from everyone I know. Your gratitude has destroyed my life. Vincent set his glass down carefully. When he spoke, his voice was measured, but there was an edge to it. You want the truth? Here it is. In my world, Miss Castellano, gratitude must have form. It must be visible. If I accepted your kindness with nothing in return, I'd be seen as weak. And weakness in my position gets people killed. So I'm what? A prop in your power play? No. He stepped closer to her, and for the first time, she saw something crack in his controlled exterior. You're the woman who saved my life when she had every reason to walk away. You're the first person in 15 years who asked for nothing, who saw me bleeding and broken and stayed. His voice dropped. I couldn't let that go unpaid. Not because of pride, because men who learn I let a debt go unpaid start thinking they can take from me too. That they can hurt people I've claimed to protect. So it's about you, Lena said coldly. Your reputation. Your image. Yes, Vincent said simply. Welcome to my world. Everything is about power and perception. Even kindness. Lena shook her head slowly. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. Your protection doesn't feel like safety, Lena continued, her voice quieter but harder. It feels like control. You fix my problems without asking. You put people in my life to watch me. You made decisions about my future without including me in them. Do you know what that is? That's not gratitude. That's ownership. Vincent was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, less controlled, more human. You're right. Lena blinked. She hadn't expected that. I'm used to solving problems with money and power, Vincent continued. It's all I've known for a very long time. I thought I was helping. But I never asked what you actually needed, he paused. What do you need, Miss Castellano? To be left alone, the words came out immediately. I need you to stop fixing my life. Stop watching me. Stop making me into something I'm not. And the rumors? Let them fade. People's attention spans are short. Eventually, they'll forget she met his eyes. Unless you keep feeding them reasons to remember. Vincent nodded slowly. You want me to disappear from your life? Yes. Even though my enemies might still see you as a connection to me? Even though that puts you at risk? Lena lifted her chin. I'd rather be at risk and free than safe and caged. Another long silence. Vincent walked back to the window, his reflection ghostly in the dark glass. You remind me of someone, he said finally. Someone I used to know. Before all of this, he gestured vaguely at the office, the empire around them. She told me once that there's no point in surviving if you lose yourself in the process. Smart woman. She was. Vincent's reflection smiled sadly. I should have listened to her. He turned back to Lena. I'll pull back the protection. Quietly. It'll take time for the rumors to die, but they will. You'll have your life back. Lena felt something unodd in her chest. Thank you. But Miss Castellano? Vincent's eyes were serious. If you ever need help, real help, the kind you actually want, you still have my number. No obligations. No strings. Just an option. Lena nodded. She didn't trust herself to speak. As she left, she heard him say one more thing, so quiet she almost missed it. You saved more than my life that night. You reminded me I used to have 1 inch. 5 weeks passed. Slowly, painfully, life began to return to something like normal. The whispers faded to occasional glances. Frank started making eye contact again. Mrs. Rodriguez even waved to her once from across the street. The Toyota remained. Lena had tried to return it, but the dealership said the title was legal and binding, but the mysterious payment stopped. Her rent was due again next month. Her mother's anonymous donor had completed the promised treatment, then vanished. Lena was back to scraping by, back to exhaustion and ramen dinners and counting pennies. And she'd never been more grateful. She hadn't heard from Vincent in 37 days. Not a word, not a sign. It was like he'd kept his promise and simply
disappeared from her life.
Lena told herself she was relieved. She almost believed it. The raid happened during the dinner rush on a Friday. Lena was carrying a tray of burgers to table for when the door burst open. Not customers, federal agents in tactical gear, weapons drawn, shouting commands she couldn't process through the sudden ringing in her ears. Everyone down. Hands where we can see them. The diner erupted into chaos. Screaming, crashing plates, people diving under tables. Lena's tray hit the floor. Danny grabbed her arm and pulled her behind the counter. What's happening? She gasped. FBI, one of the agents shouted. This establishment is under investigation for money laundering connected to the Moretti crime syndicate. Nobody moves. Lena's blood turned to ice. They tore the diner apart, ripped open the register, searched the back office, confiscated papers and receipts. Agents questioned every employee, every customer. And when they got to Lena, their questions were sharp, accusatory, pointed. How long have you worked for Vincent Moretti? I don't work for her. You've been seen entering his properties. He's paid your expenses, given you gifts. That's not. It was a thank you. I saved his. So, you admit to having a personal relationship with a known crime boss. The questions felt like punches. Each one landed harder than the last. They didn't believe her. Why would they? The evidence looked damning. The car, the rent payments, the meetings. On paper, she was exactly what they thought she was. An accomplice. When the agents finally left 3 hours later, taking boxes of records and promising to return, the damage was done. Half the customers had scattered. The others stared at Lena like she was a stranger. Danny approached her carefully, like she might explode. Lena, they're saying you helped launder money through the diner. That's insane. I didn't. I know. But he looked toward the shattered glass door, the overturned tables. I don't think the owner's going to see it that way.
He was right.
By morning, Lena's face was on the news. Local waitress connected to Moretti's syndicate. The photos they used made her look guilty, caught mid-sentence, eyes wide, like she was hiding something. Her phone exploded with messages. Some supportive. Most weren't. By noon, she was fired. Nothing personal, the owner said, not meeting her eyes. But I can't have this kind of heat on my business. By evening, Lena sat alone in her apartment, staring at Vincent's ring on her nightstand. This was his fault. All of it. His gratitude had done exactly what she'd feared. It had destroyed her life, just more slowly than she'd expected. She grabbed her jacket and the ring, and headed for the door. The warehouse looked abandoned. No guards, no Mercedes, no signs of the empire that supposedly operated here. For a moment, Lena thought she had the wrong address. Then she saw light in the second-floor windows. The door was unlocked. She climbed the stairs, her anger building with each step. By the time she burst into Vincent's office, she was ready to throw the ring at his head and scream until her voice gave out. But the words died in her throat. The office was nearly empty. Boxes everywhere, papers being fed into a shredder. Vincent sat at his desk, which was now just a bare surface, signing documents with mechanical precision. He looked exhausted. Older, somehow, than he had 5 weeks ago. He glanced up when she entered, but there was no surprise in his eyes. I wondered if you'd come, he said quietly. The FBI raided my diner. Lena's voice shook. They think I'm part of your organization. My face is on the news. I've been fired, Vincent. Because of you. I know.
I'm sorry.
Sorry? She laughed bitterly. Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't. She stopped, really looking at the room for the first time. At the boxes. The emptiness. What are you doing? Vincent set down his pen. Dissolving my empire. All of it. The businesses, the operations, the connections. I'm getting out. Lena stared at him. What? It's been in motion for 3 weeks, he gestured at the documents. These are transfer papers. I'm signing everything over to people who'll run things legitimately or selling to competitors. By the end of the month, Vincent Moretti will be just a name in old police files. I don't understand. Vincent stood and walked to the windows. Empty now, the view less impressive without the furnishings to frame it. Do you know what I thought about while I was bleeding in that alley? Before you found me? Lena shook her head. I thought, this is what I deserve. This is what happens when you build a life on fear and power. You die alone in the dark and nobody mourns you, he turned to face her. And then you appeared. This exhausted waitress who worked 16 hours a day and could barely afford to live, and you stayed. You risked yourself for a stranger. You showed me something I'd forgotten existed. What? Goodness without calculation. Courage without agenda, his voice was raw. You reminded me of the man I wanted to be before all of this. Before I let power corrupt everything I touched. Lena felt her anger wavering, replaced by something more complicated. That night changed me, Miss Castellano. Not because I almost died, I've faced death before. But because you showed me what it looks like to be brave for the right reasons, he paused. I looked at my empire and realized it was built on the graves of better versions of myself. So, I'm tearing it down. The FBI raid was coming regardless. I've been feeding them information, helping them close cases. That's part of the deal, he met her eyes. They'll clear your name within the week. I made sure of it. Lena sank into one of the remaining chairs. You're really getting out. I am. Why now? Vincent smiled sadly. Because a brave woman once told me there's no point surviving if you lose yourself in the process. And she was right. 6 months later, Lena stood in a small coffee shop in Portland, 300 miles from Harbor City, wiping down tables that weren't hers. The FBI had cleared her name, just as Vincent promised. A formal statement, a brief apology, and her face disappeared from the news cycle as quickly as it had appeared. But the damage to her reputation lingered like smoke. The diner owner wouldn't rehire her. Other restaurants in the area wouldn't touch her application.
So she'd left.
New city.
New job.
New life. It wasn't much. She was back to minimum wage, back to the exhaustion and the ramen dinners, but it was hers.
Clean.
Untangled from crime bosses and obligations and invisible hands shaping her world. She hadn't heard from Vincent since that night in his emptying office. Sometimes she wondered if he'd actually gone through with it, or if it had been a momentary crisis of conscience that faded with time. She told herself it didn't matter. She almost believed it. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in late April. Lena almost threw it away with the junk mail, another official-looking envelope she probably couldn't afford to care about. But something made her open it. Brennan and Associates, estate attorneys. Her hands started shaking before she'd read the first line. Dear Miss Castellano, it is our duty to inform you that Mr. Vincent Michael Moretti passed away on April 3rd. As per his final will and testament, you have been named as a beneficiary. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to discuss the details of your inheritance. The letter fell from her fingers.
Dead.
Vincent was dead. Lena sat on her apartment floor, staring at nothing, as the reality crashed over her. She'd spent so much time angry at him, frustrated by him, wanting him out of her life. And now he was gone, truly, permanently gone, and the grief that hit her was unexpected and overwhelming. She'd saved his life, and he'd still died.
Just.
Later, with time to change, time to choose something different. Time she'd given him. The tears came suddenly, and once they started, they wouldn't stop. The attorney's office was downtown, all polished wood and expensive leather. Mr. Brennan was a kind man in his 60s who offered her tea she couldn't drink and condolences she could barely acknowledge. Mr. Moretti was very specific in his wishes, Brennan said, sliding a folder across the desk. He left you the property deed to 4427 Westfield Avenue, the Harbor Diner building and the land it sits on. It's been fully restored and renovated. All taxes and fees paid for the next 5 years. Lena stared at the deed. Her old workplace. The place where her nightmare had started. There's also this. Brennan handed her a sealed envelope, Vincent's handwriting stark across the front. For Miss Castellano. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The note was brief, written in the same elegant script she remembered. Dear Lena, you gave me life without asking for anything in return. Maybe now, I can give you freedom. You once told me my protection felt like control, and you were right. So this is different. This is yours. No strings, no obligations, no invisible hands. Sell it, keep it, burn it down if you want. The choice is entirely yours. In that alley, I was ready to die. I'd lived long enough to know what I'd become, and I'd made peace with it.
But you didn't let me.
You stayed when you should have run. You fought for a stranger who didn't deserve your kindness. You reminded me that goodness still exists in the world. That courage doesn't require an agenda. That maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to be someone different. I spent 6 months dismantling everything I'd built. It wasn't easy. It wasn't clean. But every day, I thought about you in that alley, determined and brave, and refusing to let death win. If you could fight for a dying stranger, I could fight to become someone worth saving. I'm at peace now, Lena. Really at peace. Because of you. Thank you for my life, all the years I had, and the man I got to be at the end of them. Vincent. P.S. I've named it Moretti's Cafe. Feel free to change it. But I hoped maybe you'd keep it as a reminder that people can change, that second chances matter. Lena read the note 3 times, tears streaming down her face. 3 weeks later, Lena stood outside 4427 Westfield Avenue with a key in her hand. The building looked different. New windows, fresh paint, a sign hanging above the door, Moretti's Cafe in elegant gold lettering. Through the windows, she could see new tables, modern fixtures, a gleaming espresso machine. Everything she'd ever dreamed of having. Built from a life she'd saved one rainy night when she could have walked away. Danny appeared beside her. She'd called him, told him everything, offered him a job. He stared at the building with wide eyes. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "It is." Lena turned the key in the lock. The door swung open. Inside, everything smelled new and full of possibility. There was a photo on the wall near the entrance, black and white, tasteful. A man in a suit, eyes serious but kind. Underneath, a small plaque. "In memory of Vincent Moretti, who learned that it's never too late to change." Lena touched the frame gently. "Thank you," she whispered, "for trusting me with your second chance." She walked behind the counter, ran her hand across the smooth surface, and looked out at the empty cafe. Tomorrow there would be customers, coffee brewing, conversations and laughter and life. Tomorrow, she would open the doors to her second chance, built not from crime or power, but from one night when a dying man and an exhausted waitress both chose courage over fear. Danny joined her behind the counter.
"So, boss,
"When do we open?" Lena smiled, a real smile, the first in months. "Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Same as always." But nothing was the same. Everything was different. Everything was hers. And in the reflection of the window, as the afternoon sun painted everything gold, Lena could almost see Vincent Moretti smiling back, finally free, finally at peace. Finally the man he'd wanted to be.